Hello and welcome to the Aging Like a Pro podcast. I'm your host, Rosa Hart. We will be hearing from experts from the University of Miami. Together, we'll be learning about aging like a pro. Today, we are speaking with Dr. Sonya Kaur from the University of Miami. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we are going to talk about mindfulness.
Okay.
Let's start with the basics. What is mindfulness?
So mindfulness is the act of paying attention in a way that is focused on the present moment, but also non-judgmental. So both of those components are really important because on one hand, you're trying to stay in the present moment, but on the other hand, you're not judging yourself. You're not judging any thoughts or any sensory input that you're getting. You're just letting it come in and letting it go and wash over you. Mindfulness was actually, it's got a really long and rich history that has its roots in ancient Eastern philosophy, but it really gained popularity in the West in the 1990s, largely through the work of Jon Kabat-Zinn, who has really pioneered the incorporation of mindfulness into therapy and the medical setting.
I've heard it described as focus on being instead of doing. So what would be an example of that? How would you describe being versus doing?
Well, doing is more of the default state of mind for a lot of people. It's when we're thinking of the next task that we need to do. So it can be a simple task like making dinner, or, well, that might not be simple depending. Or it could be a really complex task and hard to achieve, like going to the moon. That's a goal too. Psychologically, you can have goals as well. So a lot of the times our mind will be telling us, I want to be happy today, or I don't want to make any mistakes. I'm not going to get angry. The trouble is when we hold ourselves to these goals, it can be very distressing when we don't achieve them. Versus the being state where we're just having a really rich experience of what we're experiencing in the present. We're not thinking about the future. We're not thinking about what we can do or what we want to do or what has happened in the past. We're thinking about right now. So an analogy is the fish tank, right? So you've got the fish that are swimming around in the tank, and they're in the doing state. They're thinking about the obstacles and how they're moving around, and they're taking in all the sensory input. Whereas the plants that are in the fish tank, they're just soaking up the sunlight. They're growing. They're experiencing the water on their leaves, but they're not actually thinking about anything.
So what are some common ways that people can practice mindfulness?
So you can have focused mindfulness, right? So focused mindfulness involves, you can have a simple breathing exercise. You can have a body scan is very common, which is when you're focusing your attention on different parts of your body, usually from the top of your head all the way down to your feet. And you can have movement that incorporates mindfulness as well. So a lot of Zen centers and a lot of people who do practice mindfulness, they do walking meditations. So they go for a walk in the park, in the forest, whatever they have access to really, and they're taking in all that they're experiencing while they're on this walk without talking, without being on your phone. That's a big one. There are also ways in which we do mindfulness while doing a certain particular form of exercise. So yoga, qigong, and tai chi, these are all exercises that incorporate mindfulness, focusing on different muscles of the body, different movements as you're doing them.
I think we all experience our mind wandering. So how would that relate to mindfulness?
It actually does. When your mind wanders, that's really when you're focusing on a thought that's different from the task that's at hand, which a lot of people think is the complete opposite of mindfulness, which is when you're focusing on the present moment, right? But our brain's default setting is for our mind to wander. A lot of the times, as much as 50% of our waking time is spent with spontaneous thoughts popping into our head, sometimes unrelated to the task at hand, sometimes related to things that happened in the past, things that happen in the future, and just random thoughts that come up, right? And in some ways that can be a good thing because it sparks creativity. It's really useful when it comes to brainstorming sessions at work, but it can sort of make it difficult with mindfulness. However, mind wandering can be a part of mindfulness as well. When you're practicing your mindfulness, either focusing on your breathing, on your body, on any mindfulness practice that you're having, a lot of the times our mind does tend to wander. And a big part of mindfulness is that non-judgmental component where we don't judge ourselves and we don't judge our thoughts, right? We just let them come and we let them go. And we slowly integrate our thoughts back into the practice and back into the present moment. A lot of the time we use our breath or something else as an anchor in which to redirect our attention back to the present. So we notice the mind wandering and we go right back into it.
Now there's been a lot of research into mindfulness. Can you share some of the key findings?
Oh, there's a lot. It's extremely, extremely, extremely popular area of research. What people have found all over the country and all over the world is that a regular and consistent mindfulness practice can be helpful in a lot of psychiatric disorders, most notably depression and anxiety. In individuals who are experiencing chronic pain, a regular mindfulness practice not only is associated with decreases in levels of depression, but also reductions in your subjective experience of pain. For survivors of strokes, traumatic brain injury, multiple sclerosis, neurological conditions that are associated with a lot of fatigue or tiredness, regular mindfulness practice can actually reduce that experience of tiredness. And as a neuropsychologist, I'm always interested in thinking skills, and mindfulness is linked to stronger attention in individuals who have ADHD, as well as just in general.
As a neuropsychologist, you are an expert in the brain. So how does mindfulness affect the brain?
Mindfulness can affect the brain in a lot of different ways, primarily through neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to change structure and function depending on the situation, right? So a lot of the time, younger kids who experience strokes, brain tumors, they have brain surgery, their brain is able to reorganize so they can recover a good amount of function. And this plasticity gets less as we get older. So unfortunately, as we get older, our brain's ability to form new connections tends to go down. But mindfulness can bring some of that back a little bit through reductions in stress. So a regular mindfulness practice is linked to changes in levels of key chemicals in the brain that are associated with stress. So mindfulness is linked to higher levels of GABA and serotonin, as well as lower levels of norepinephrine, all of which are linked to stress. And stress is linked to a lot of cardiovascular issues like hypertension, high cholesterol, inflammation in your body, as well as in your brain. Also, it impedes the growth of new neurons. So the Alzheimer's Association recently released a list of lifestyle changes that people can make in order to reduce your chances to prevent about 41% of cases of dementia. And reducing stress, reducing depression is on that list.
Could you explain some of the mechanisms behind these changes and how they work?
So really a lot of that, the main mechanism through which this happens is through changes in levels of neurochemicals in the brain, as well as changes in the cardiovascular factors that I talked about. We talk about it a lot. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. And so reductions in stress levels, reductions in blood pressure, reductions in cholesterol, this has a very, very strong effect on our brain health as well.
And what about self-compassion? How does that tie into mindfulness?
So self-compassion is an offshoot of mindfulness that was really, a lot of the work has been done at the University of Texas, which is actually my alma mater, and by a professor called Kirsten Neff. She has really pioneered the concept of taking in the care and the grace, for lack of a better word, that we tend to give to other people, we tend to give to our loved ones. A lot more compassion and grace when they're facing challenges, when things are going wrong, when they make mistakes. But we also tend to be very, very hard on ourselves. That's very common with women, but it happens to men too. And so self-compassion work involves incorporating mindfulness by reminding yourself to be kind to yourself, to give grace to yourself, reminding yourself of your strengths. And that can help us to improve resilience and coping.
Do you have any recommendations for resources for those who are interested in starting their own mindfulness practice?
Absolutely. Although if you do have severe depression and anxiety, it's always recommended that you work with a licensed therapist. But if you want to start a practice on your own, Jon Kabat-Zinn, who did a lot of the work in bringing mindfulness to the West, he had a book called Mindfulness for Beginners. That's a great place to start. Dan Harris's 10% Happier. It's also a book and a podcast that people can look at and listen to, and especially for skeptics of mindfulness. It offers a really good real-world perspective on mindfulness. There are also free 8-week courses on palousmindfulness.com that are available in both English and Spanish that people can take that include guided meditation. If you're interested in self-compassion, Kirsten Neff's website, selfcompassion.org, also has some free self-compassion meditations that you can listen to as well.
Well, those sound like fantastic resources. Before we wrap up, is there a simple mindfulness exercise our listeners could try?
Well, this is one that I usually give beginners. It involves the humbled raisin. So, here you go. Thank you. So it always helps, especially for someone, if you don't have any experience with mindfulness, to have something to sort of ground your thoughts in. So let's look at the raisin, right? Look at how it looks. Let's take some deep breaths, soften our gaze, and focus our attention on how it feels in our hand, between our fingers. Focus your attention on the skin of the raisin and the color. Let's look at how it smells, and then we'll put it in our mouths. And focus on how it tastes.
It tastes good. Thank you for bringing this.
Yeah, it's a quick way to get started because a lot of focused mindfulness breathing exercises and focused body scan work, that is obviously important. That's something that we can do. But we can incorporate mindfulness into almost everything.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, Dr. Kaur.
Thank you.